The influence of DEI departments and game development studios has had a net negative effect. I'm going to talk about what Western game developers can do to right the ship. Why is it that there is controversy around some games and others with similar elements do extremely well? It's common for grifters on the left and the right to reduce the issue to simple talking points. The left claims that if the right criticizes the trend of inserting incongruous diversity elements, they are bigoted Nazis. The right says that anything that addresses political issues or has diverse elements is woke. It's a vicious circle that never arrives at a solution. Both sides get some stuff right. The right claims that the games are bad because of the attempt by DEI agencies to cram diversity into every aspect of a game, even when it doesn't make sense, and also because game studios tend to inject preachy political messages into games. The left is right that today, the right calls anything and everything woke that depicts underrepresented groups or contains political elements. So what can be done to resolve the diversity issue in video games? I propose two solutions: attention to narrative consistency and a focus on fun gameplay. Everything else will work itself out if game developers focus on these two key elements. Let's look at two games that attempted similar goals but had very different outcomes. They both dealt with issues of race, politics, and culture, and they both attempted to create a unique, genre-defying experience. But one, Disco Elysium, was a huge success, selling millions of copies, and players were clamoring for a sequel. On the other hand, Dustborn barely made it on gamers' radar except for the controversy surrounding it, and had a peak concurrent player count of 84 on Steam. Disco Elysium seamlessly weaves political ideologies into its narrative. Revachol, the fictional city where it takes place, feels alive as a post-war city struggling to grasp onto an identity. The architecture reflects the various stages of political and cultural movements in the city. The revolution that took place between the communards, Eastern European-influenced communism, and the moral intern, a sort of humanist democratic theocracy, can still be felt in the interactions with the NPCs and with the city itself. It's a very political setting, yet the politics feel like a natural extension of the setting, and not a vehicle for the developers to beat you over the head with their opinion. They present their opinion through a coherent, believable, and consistent narrative, and leave room for the player to make up his or her own mind about how to feel about things and what decisions to make. Disco Elysium feels like you're being transported to a living city that makes you want to explore and figure out not only the mystery you're there to solve, but what makes the city and its people tick. Dustborn, on the other hand, is a perfect example of how not to make a game. A government-funded game developed in Norway, Dustborn completely flopped. It felt inauthentic, uncool, and cheesy in a bad way. In Dustborn, the setting and the characters feel like checkboxes on some DEI consultant's list of funding requirements. As Pax, the main protagonist, you don't get to choose what you think about the setting. You hate the American Republic, a contrived representation of a fascistic post-Trump land as imagined in some leftist fever dream. There is no nuance. The Republic and the people that support it are bad, and it just doesn't mesh with the vibe of the art direction and the character design. The setting is too obvious, too unoriginal, too familiar, that it rips the player out of the experience and they're reminded they're playing a video game. The second reason why Disco Elysium crushed Dustborn is because it is fun and Dustborn isn't. Disco Elysium has a unique system of skill advancement where you internalize thoughts or memories. These can be related to your physical skill, intelligence, political leanings, and other categories. As Detective Harry Dubois, you can choose to side with any faction in Revachol, internalize any mundane or insane thoughts you have about the things you experience, and turn them into ability bonuses. You can take your job seriously and maybe develop a deep appreciation for socialism, or you can dive headfirst into hedonism and anarchy. This is fun. It means you can essentially play a completely different Harry every playthrough, and they're fun to experiment with and see how it influences the story. Dustborn also attempted to introduce a unique game mechanic. Some of the characters have a special power called a Vox. They can do things like trigger or gaslight people with their superpower. The idea in theory is interesting, but the implementation was lame. It wasn't fun, the characters just come off as mean, manipulative, and self-absorbed, and it was everything that is pretty intolerable about leftists in general. Now, to be fair, the idea is that the characters grow to realize they should use their power responsibly, but getting there just wasn't fun. And you can't choose how to feel about big picture stuff, which is kind of the point of these choices matter type RPGs. So what can developers learn from these two games that essentially had very similar goals? Make the game fun and put some effort into the setting and the narrative of the game. Gamers will play a game regardless of its politics or its diversity if it is fun and immersive, and everybody gets what they want.